My name is Jacopo Monzini. I'm from FAO. I'm here today to introduce you to this workshop and to guide you through it. So I'll be your moderator. So I will not present, thank God. So let me first immediately start by introducing the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, our colleague Eri, that she will just give us few welcome words, and then we will move immediately, I swear, through the presentations and trying to understand how, if and how, we can make money out of commercial urban farming. Eri, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jacopo, and hello everybody who is here and everyone who will be watching this online later on. My name is Serifili Nomikou. I work at the agribusiness team of the EBRD, and together with FAO we're working on an urban farming project. So far, in the context of the project, we had 4 dialogues which were attended by over 500 people, which is amazing. We're building a great network. And thank you for being here today for our workshop on how to make urban farming economically viable. I look forward to the panelists and the discussion. At the EBRD, we look at the sector and we try to understand challenges and opportunities for us to provide advisory services and also investments. So I'll stop here. Again, welcome everybody, thanks, and have a good session.
All right, thank you very much. And before I give the floor to Professor Orsini from Bologna University, that you all know, it's quite a start, let me thank the ISC for hosting us and for this opportunity, and of course to the University of Bologna, Liège University, and Wageningen University for their support in this project. Francesco, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. A very brief introduction on why we are here with this workshop. We have been involved, the University of Bologna, the University of Liège, and the University of Wageningen in this study in the support of understanding how urban agriculture is becoming a commercial opportunity and whether it can be promoted in the EBRD target countries. We have been working, collaborating and collecting data from over 650 key actors of the sector, which include large and medium farming companies, technology and input providers, but as you see also universities, investors, retailers, architecture studios, human resource recruiters, and municipalities that are already operating in the sector. We see some common data. Very often, urban farming projects occupy leased or rented spaces. They also integrate controlled environment agriculture and do not use soil, normally use hydroponics. In 40% of the cases, they were already integrating vertical farming technologies, operating over 1,000 square meters of surface. They do sometimes use certification. They might target national or local markets, and they claim they can save a lot of water and have very high productivity as compared to other urban farming systems. Technologies are often highly demanding in energy, but there is an improvement, and what we see is that energy consumption is increasing year by year thanks to the technological improvements. Looking at the history of companies and stakeholders of the sector, we have seen a very large growth in the last decade, as this chart shows, both in terms of technology provider and commercial urban farms. At the same time, and these are average data from a number of market studies that were released in the last few years, we see a growing trend in investment with an And when we plot this data together, they follow an exponential function, as you see here, with an expected growth over $30 billion in 2030. Looking at who is investing in the sector, we also see that although venture capital and private individual investors are still very important, other type of investors are entering into the sector, which mean that we might be exiting the so-called startup phase, and the sector is becoming more and more established. We have some main drawbacks. These are data from 2019. We are currently updating them. As I told you, changes in efficiency are experienced year by year. But we still see that whenever we have a vertical farm, the energy requirements are very high, and bring crop production to values similar to those experienced in animal production. The solution is looking for more and more efficient systems, appropriate energy management, and also integrating different energy sources. According to the Elevate energy need, we also have issues associated with greenhouse gas emissions, but the values that were presented here that were based on the few studies that were available in 2018 are decreasing, and new evidences are available on lower impact of these systems, but still very high as compared to more traditional systems. These are systems that allow for high production. This is the reported productive capacity from the survey I was presenting before, with values that are much higher than what is commonly observed in traditional urban farming systems. Water saving is possible with this system, and the value that you see here now, they are further improved if we consider also the recovery of the atmospheric water that is within the growing cultivation unit. This said, we are looking for further exploring the sector, and what we will be discussing today is about the state of the art on technology and cost with Professor Leo Marcellis, and economic opportunities for commercial urban farming with Dr. Vicente Balseca. So I leave the floor to them for their presentation.
Thank you, Francesco. Very interesting. I'll give the floor now to Professor Marcellis for his part of the presentation. We decided to have the presentations and then the question and answers to have a lively discussion without any interruption. Leo, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad to see that still so many people after this long day of nice talks are still here. So thanks a lot for that. So I present some work which was mainly done by two postdocs in my group, Paul Kusuma and Ying Liu. And the focus of our study was on urban agriculture, but then in particular on the most advanced technology within the urban agriculture. And what we did do is we studied literature, and we did do interviews with a number of companies and researchers. And then we can, and I should say, well, we have made a long presentation about this study with many slides, so I just took out a limited number, not to bore you too much. First of all, it's maybe interesting to see, well, what is the yield in a vertical farm or in a greenhouse or in the field? And that's what you see here for leaf. On the x-axis you see field, greenhouse, vertical farm. And what can be the yield of a leafy green or of a tomato? And these are mainly based on the interviews, partly supported by literature, but for some there is no literature that's within it directly. It's only based on the interviews. Well, and then this is very clear. If you have in the field, a very low rate, you see a huge increase when you grow in a greenhouse, and then in the vertical farm, it's much higher. And I should say here the yield in a vertical farm, because usually a vertical farm is many layers above each other, or it could also be a vertical wall. But if it is a horizontal layer, this is per layer. So the yield, if we would have 10 layers above each other, it would be 10 times higher for the vertical farm. Well, one of the bottlenecks of vertical farming is that it needs a lot of capital. And I also should say it is very difficult to get reliable numbers on the costs. So that's also a remark also here. Those numbers, they have a lot of variation. They are mainly based on the interview when it comes to the vertical farming. The sector is so new, prices are changing, not all people want to say the cost, but the trend is clear. I hope that the numbers are visible. You can see from left to right, you can see open field, plastic tunnel, greenhouse, vertical farm, container, vertical farm, buildings from left to right, higher level of technology. And for some of those, we could also get some values on how is the trend. Overall, the trend is that if you look, for instance, at the vertical farming, which is so new, we see the cost decline. Well, that is not the case for all the others, because that are established techniques, production systems. But what you can also see, if you go from left to right, for the capital investment in the open field, well, that's not much. But if you go to a vertical farm, yeah, then it may easily end up with a few thousand euro per square meter. And again, when I say per area, it is always per cultivation area, so one layer, because we think that's the most fair comparison. So that's a lot of money. And then we also can look at, well, what are then the operation expenditures, the OPEX, and what are the major cost factors? Well, the major cost factors are definitely is the energy and is the labor. I should say, well, the investment is also, the interest rates can be very high. So energy, yeah, it's probably somewhere between 20–40%, very much depends on how it is laid out. And similarly for labor, which labor is probably just a little bit higher even than the energy cost. So these are substantial factors. So if you want to reduce costs, then these are also items to consider. There's a lot of energy costs, and that is important with respect to the economics, but is also directly related to sustainability. So two items which are extremely important. Well, where is the energy used for? Most of the energy is used for the light. And there is a large fraction also for the climate control, for the HVAC. HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, air conditioning. But often when there is more light energy, you need also more cost for the climate control. So they are also directly connected to each other. And there's also, well, how does this system look like? I mainly focus on vertical farms, but it could all, with high-tech indoor production, but we can also think about some protected structures, which are from, well, could be wooden structures, shade house, up to a venue type of greenhouse made of glass. Or if you go to the vertical farming, and so as I said, vertical farming, I in particular look at systems indoor with only artificial light. It can be in a supermarket, it can be a container, it can be in warehouses, in buildings. So you see here a few of those examples. And it can be in horizontal layers, so that's what maybe we see, that's what most people think of having one layer, two layers, many layers above each other, and you can go, well, quite high. But you could also have systems which have a vertical layer. We can discuss a lot of what are the advantages and disadvantages, and there's probably a lot of debate on which one would you prefer. But I will not have time now, but well, if it is a discussion, well, if there is interest, we can discuss that later. Automation, there's a lot of opportunity for automation, and labor costs are high, so it's important. But automation at the same time, it is expensive. It's expensive, but it can reduce the labor costs. It can also help to further improve the whole production. Here is also mentioned, well, maybe it can also reduce the investment in sensor technology. If you want to go to an automated production, we need a lot of sensors, but we could also move the plants towards the sensors, so then you need less sensors. Or move the sensor to the plant. Lighting is a big thing determining the energy costs. In the past decades, or let's say in particular in the past decade, there has been very much increase in the energy use efficiency. And partly that came because the lamps got much more efficient. So we are now using LEDs. LEDs are very efficient, and you can see here, if you look at the purple-pink line, how that in the last 2 decades, how the efficiency increased. We don't know how that will further increase, but it is not likely that it will be the same increase in the past, in the coming 10 years, that it will be the same as the past 10 years. It's just simply impossible. If we are now already look at the efficiency, 100% efficiency will never be possible. Still, there is room for improvement, but I think the next step in the technology comes now maybe from some other colors used, or making it cheaper. Then the climate, and with climate, maybe you all think about temperature, yes, temperature, and maybe you think about heating. No, it is, in most cases, it's rather cooling than it is heating, because we get already the energy from the lamps, which just do most of the day the heating. But in a number of cases, and that's in particular if the LEDs would be more efficient, we would need less cooling, could save on energy for temperature control. But it is not only about the temperature. Those plants are transpiring, and that's also a mistake. Many people who start from outside the sector do not directly realize that those plants are transpiring a lot, producing a lot of water vapor, which also means a climate control for that. And then airflow is in particular used, which is needed to meet the climate uniform, to control it, but it also directly affects the transpiration and the photosynthesis of the plant. And finally, last but not least, there's CO2 supply. And if you would not supply CO2, the yield would be low, and I would say that's a bit of a pity of all your investments, of the big investments, so you don't forget to use CO2. But it means that we all have to control them. And this is above ground, but of course there's also the below ground. How do we grow? Do we grow in soil? Well, could be, but then it will be in containers of soil. But in most cases we see here a soilless cultivation. Maybe the slide here is too small and I don't have the time to mention it all. There are you can grow just in water, deep flow culture. We can grow in aeroponics, so where the roots are continuously misted, or we could use different type of substrates ranging from a rock wool or a cocoa core. And then sensors. Now, why do we need the sensors? Because we can control everything, but then we need to know whether we control it in the right way. Do we have the light intensity and spectrum that we have? Do we have the temperature, the humidity, the airspeed, and the CO2 that you would like to have? Is there sufficient oxygen in the water of the plants? And those type of sensors, I would say that are mature sensors. They can be used by everyone. But the next step is that we go a step further in the control, and then we have sensors measuring on the plants. We call this immature technique. Well, we can debate whether it's immature or when it is mature. So a number of sensors are already quite good, but we see here a lot of developments at this moment, and many of those sensors are more at the demonstration phase, pilot phase, but they're soon reaching out to being used in larger scale. The big thing here comes that we get methods to interpret all the large quantity of data. That's an enormous opportunity here to collecting all the data, to use it and to further optimize the system, control the system. We hear already a lot about it. To be honest, quite often it's about wishful thinking, but it does not implement it. But the opportunities are there. We are there to now make it really work. Genetics. I will just say briefly, in general, there has not been specific breeding for vertical farming. There has been a little bit of selection of existing varieties. But if you would really breed for vertical farming, then we can make a big step in the yield, in the efficiency. Because we all know in all crops there's always a huge interaction between the genotype and the environment. This is not yet explored for vertical farming yet. We need to breed for that, we need to breed for quality, we need to breed for a different architecture of a plant, so that in the end we can grow the plant with less light, with less cost. The question that we got here also in the FAO, can we make it cheaper? How can we downscale it to make it cheaper? How can we reduce the investment cost? Well, maybe we can just say, well, remove automation. It's a huge cost. Of course, we will get more labor costs. When we discuss about growing horizontally and vertically, I don't think we can now say which one is better, but usually horizontally growing is cheaper. Use simple, use flexible system. And maybe we should grow in a hybrid system, hybrid between greenhouse and vertical farming. But we also have to realize that we get less ability for we get less opportunities for complete control of the climate. So usually it also comes at a cost, but then it is balancing and finding where we can move forward. So downscaling the technology is also a necessary step to make it cheaper. On the other hand, it is also difficult to maintain the quality. And if we have vertical farm, I use it here, a vertical farm can be just anywhere in the world, independent of the climate, independent of the weather, independent of the soil. But still, we need to look at local needs, local markets, local environment when we choose the right production system. The local systems might come also at a cost of less yield or less quality. So where is the balance? I also would like to say a few quotes, because I said we have interviewed a large number of companies, and these are quotes from two large vertical farming companies. One said, well, now we use half the energy compared to 5 years ago. This is driven by the efficiency of light, partly by getting more efficient lamps, but probably in the coming years that's getting less opportunities. But there's still a lot of opportunities that the plant makes more efficient use of the light. And it's hard to predict where it will go, but we are still in a situation where a lot of improvements are possible. Or another company who said, well, we cut our costs in half every 3 years. Okay, I couldn't check, I did not see all their finances, but and this is what we heard from several companies, that costs are high, costs are also going down. And I would like to thank the companies that we interviewed. Here's a long list. I guess it is too long now to mention them all, and I'm happy to see that also some of them are here in the room. But I would like to thank them all for their nice cooperation and their openness. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope we can have some discussion on some of the topics that I mentioned.
Thank you very much. Neil, very important point you made, very essential. Let's move to the third presentation. Vicente, please, the floor is yours, and we will explore the different business models, how different companies and approaches are addressing this issue. Vicente, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. So I'm Vicente Valseca, and I'm a researcher from the research center of the research center of urban agriculture, of the University of Liège, coordinated by Aysam Jejaki, who is just here. I will associate the economics presented by by Francesco, and the technologies presented by Leo with the business models implemented in urban agriculture. Oh, okay. So, the outline of my presentation is that I will just explain you briefly the objectives of our research and the methods we implement, and also to emphasize on the limits we face to manage such research. Then, I will present an overview of the different business models implemented in urban agriculture, to conclude by recommendations that can help to make urban agriculture more viable. So, very quickly, the objectives of our research were to define, analyze, and present the different business models implemented in urban agriculture. To do so, we use an online questionnaire to collect quantitative data. We manage some semi-structured interviews with companies of urban agriculture, and we used the business model Canva template. First, to analyze the business models of the company, and also to be able to compare the different business models between them. We have interviewed 24 organizations from 17 countries from all over the world, as you can see here in the presentation, as our goal was to have an overview that could be the more representative possible. And to do so, we face really strong limits. First, as Leo told us, it's really difficult to obtain financial data from the urban farming companies. We have also faced huge difficulties to build our sample, as the companies doesn't talk about their business model and about their financial information. So, our research was mainly focused on a qualitative approach that aims to understand how the different companies manage their business and what were the main issues they have to face. And finally, regarding our objectives, we mainly focused on commercially driven companies. And doing so, the socially driven ones are less represented in our sample. So, just to give you an idea, what is a business model? A business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value, according to Osterwalder and Pinier. As you can see here, in the horizontal line, there were already 6 business models identified by the literature. The shared economy business model is mostly a socially driven one. So the idea is to share the risk of the company between the beneficiaries, between the customers. Then the experimental business model is mainly a business model implemented by companies that are like pilot projects. So the goal of these companies is to test a new technique, a new technology, or a new economical model, and to see if it works. The experience business model is a business model where the experience of the farm is sale. So they don't really sell the products, but they sell the experience, the natural connection, or people can come and just pick the veggies and learn how it works. So they really sell the experience around the farm. Regarding diversification business model, there are farms that produce crops, but that have also developed different activities around the farm to diversify the income flows. For example, they rent the area, they will organize events, they have restaurants, etc. So they do other activities around the farm, even if they also produce a large variety of crops. Regarding differentiation, the idea is to produce high added value products. So the companies that implement these business models are really focused on the premium market, mainly restaurants, hotels, and they sell unique or very rare crops to these premium customers, and they sell it with a premium price. And finally, the cost reduction business model is focused on easy to grow products, like lettuce, for example, that can be produced with a huge yield using technologies like hydroponics, etc. So these models are really focused on scale economy, strategy, and are focused on selling the crops to the mass market. So here you can see the different technologies that are mainly used in function of the business model. The shared economy business model and the experience business model mainly practice agriculture on soil, like conventional agriculture, And the other business models have begun to use high technologies like hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics, etc. Regarding the surface, it's interesting to underline that the needed surface depends, of course, of the business model and of the objective. As you can see, the business model that practice agriculture on soil need higher surface than the other ones, as agriculture on soil need higher surfaces. It's also interesting to underline that the cost reduction business model needs at least 1 hectare of surface to be viable. And we can explain it as they have economy of scale strategy. So they need large areas to produce huge volumes of products and to produce huge volumes of products. Sorry for the micro. We have also identified the human resources requirements depending of each business model and the qualification level required to manage such business models. As you can see here in the table, the business models that use huge technology, high technologies, like hydroponics, etc., also required high qualified human resources to manage such technologies. Just to give you an example, we have identified here all over the world different companies that implement the different business models. For example, here for cost reduction business model, there is Gotham Greens from the United States, Lufa Farms from Canada, or Spray from Japan that are focused on cost reduction business models, so that have a scale economy strategy. Now, regarding the financial aspect and the investment requirements in function of the different business models, you can see here a range of investment needs to launch such business model. A point that is really interesting to underline is that we have classified the different business models in function of their bankability, of their financial interest. So, for example, in the left you can see the shared economy business model that is, as I've told you before, mainly focused on socially driven aspects. That is socially driven. And on the other side of the slide, you can see at the right the cost reduction business model that is really economically driven. And that produce benefits that can be shared by the different investors. On the other hand, there is you can see that there is an opposite interest for the public investment. So, for example, with the shared economy business model, okay, it doesn't produce benefit for shareholders, but it has huge social and environmental impacts or externalities that are very interesting for the public sector. Here we have done a work searching the different success factors and the main challenges that the companies implementing each business model should face. Here in the presentation, I will just focus on the success factors of the three last companies, as they are the more profitable ones. But we can talk about the other points later with pleasure. So the diversification, the companies that implement diversification in business model really need to to think their offers in function of the customer's needs. They really need to take in consideration the needs, the demand of the customers to define what activities they will propose. They also need to have a limited number of activities, and just to propose things that they are able to manage properly. If they have too much activities, they will be lost and it will become difficult to develop their project. And finally, these companies need a really strong, attractive and positive branding to be able to reach their customers. Indeed, as they are focusing different customer segments, they need to communicate properly to reach these different segments, being one only company. Regarding differentiation business model, one of the main success factors is to identify which are the high added value products that are demanded locally, and then to be sure that they are able to produce these products with the highest quality, possible. And finally, the differentiation companies really need to have access to highly trained human resources to manage the technologies they use. And here, finally, regarding the cost reduction business model, as I told before, it's really important to ensure a sufficient area to implement, to launch such company. We estimate that the minimum need is at least 1 hectare. These companies also need huge investment in the pre-creation stage for the research and development, as the cost reduction companies are focused on reducing the cost and on maximizing the yield of the crops they produce. And finally, as the differentiation business model, they really need to have access to highly trained human resources to manage their company, the project. And when doing this research, we have also discovered a new business model that wasn't known by the literature before. And this business model we name farm management business model. It is launched by entrepreneurs that are mostly technicians, like informatics or agronomists, and that have developed skills building and managing farms like hydroponics or aquaponic systems. They are really interested on the technologies they have developed, but they don't want to be involved in selling the products in the food market, and all the issues around it. So what they do their know-how. So they build farms and they manage it for their customers. It's really interesting because it's a really innovative approach regarding the other business models I've just talked about before, because the others, or they sell the products or they sell activities or events. Here we are selling know-how to very special customers that are mainly private companies already involved in food industry, like retail companies or restaurants or that kind of stakeholders. In this slide, you can have a brief overview of the different characteristics of the companies that we have interviewed and that implement the farm management business model. I will not spend too much time on this, but just underline that one of the biggest value proposition for the customers of these companies is to fulfill their ESG boxes and to have a nice reports about their sustainability strategy that are important for the customers and for the investors of the customers of the farm management companies. Here you can see an example from Europe and from United States of America of some companies that implement the new business model I've just told about. To conclude my presentation, I just would like to underline on 3 important elements. The first one is that it's very, very difficult to obtain financial data from the urban farming companies. And this lack of information, it's a real problem as it leads to suspicion from the investors. And it also leads to misunderstand the urban farming and its viability. So, of course, if we don't have data, and if we are investors, we will feel that it's a really risky investment to invest in urban farming companies. The second element that seems very important to me is that this presentation is like a photo, an analysis of the current situation. But it can change, and evolution is possible in the next years due to the global context, like climate change, the lack of resources, also the technology improvements that can change the conclusions I've just made, and that can transform urban agriculture in urban companies, in projects more profitable and more suitable. And finally, I think that it's important to keep in mind that urban farming is a business. Usually we talk a lot about techniques, about technologies, about how to improve the yield, etc., etc. But when we want to launch an urban farming project, we should really keep in mind the business issues, like to respond to the customers' demand, to have a strong marketing strategy, to have a strong prospection strategy, for example. And I think that are really the most important points to keep in mind when talking about urban agriculture business models and economical viability. So thank you for your attention. And
the panel's presenters. It's very good.